Hi there, in this video I want to share two fundamental principles of natural intelligence, and I want you to treat this video as an idea or invention disclosure. Even if it's not invention per se, I want to share my understanding of natural intelligence and how I think at least part of it works. First fundamental principle is related to the thalamus, why we need it and what kind of role it plays in intelligence. And the second one describes one of the functions of the neocortex. I suspect there are more fundamental principles there. We can discuss what it could be in the next videos, as well as what is most certainly not related to intelligence. I'll try to make this video as short as possible, so stick around and let's begin. So the first fundamental principle derived from the connectivity problem, as I call it. I don't know whether it's already described somewhere in the literature. If you find the link, please share. And consider to subscribe. Here is the connectivity problem statement. Imagine that you need to connect eye to the brain, to the cerebral cortex. Optic nerve axon count is around million plus minus. Cerebral cortex expects signal to be topographically arranged. That means that image as you see should be projected to the brain without scrambling it, in the same order as it arranged on the retina. How could you implement it if you were in nature? There are several approaches to that. First one, we can grow eye out of the neocortex. That's probably not an option because we would have to grow the whole body in that way. Second option is to use signal molecules when the axon grows and attach each axon precisely to the expected place on the neocortex. In this case, we will have one-to-one map from the retina to the exact position in the brain. There are several problems with that. First of all, algorithm of precise targeting of million axons is pretty hard to pass through DNA. It's hard to pass through generations without being destroyed by mutations and errors. And it's only an eye. We also have skin, ears, muscles, and other internal organs. And all of those should be mapped precisely to the neocortex. And that's the problem by itself. Sooner or later there will be a case where the part of signal will be scrambled. Or, for example, regions will be swapped with each other. But we don't observe such issues. Even more, in the inverted glasses experiments conducted by George Stratton, after a few days of wearing glasses, inverting images, both upside down and left to right, he stated that he started to see the world normally, and after taking glasses off, the sense of strangeness returned. For a short period of time though, or for example during retinal degeneration disorders, when visual cells degrade over time, we don't see black dots similar to the defective pixel on the monitor. The image just collapses and excludes that defective point. So after a while, the image becomes more and more blurry. But usually it happens so slowly that it's hard to notice that something weird happening. And this leads us to the third approach. What if we connect eye to something that has a projection to the neocortex? And this something will sort signal feed to be able to project it topographically to the neocortex. This is what I think thalamus is responsible for, besides being a signal relay and filter. So from my perspective, thalamus slowly pulls similar signals which happen at the same time together. And this slowly sorts and arranges scrambled signals, for example from an eye, to the meaningful image. This is why you can see the movement in some static optical illusion pictures. Thalamus tries to collapse repetitive patterns into one, since those are very similar. Once it's all sorted, the result is projected to the neocortex. And here is the second fundamental principle that kicks off. It's related to the neocortex. Horizontally, neocortex consists of 6 layers. Each one contains a set of different neurons. Some of them are inhibitory and other ones are excitatory. Vertically, neocortex consists of cortical columns. Each column can react on certain pattern of a small portion of topologically sorted signal. In the case of image, we can think that one column reacts on vertical lines, another one, which near to the first one, on the horizontal lines, third one on the 45-degree lines, and so on. The question here: who tuned those cortical columns to react in this specific way? Why, for example, 2 near columns couldn't react on the same pattern? Why all of them couldn't react on the same pattern at the same time? And if you decide to set up cortical columns through DNA, how you will adjust it to the changing environment? Maybe everyone before you lived in the North Pole, and now you have to survive on the equator and build columns a bit differently. So Programming it through DNA is not the best option, and the way it's probably solved by nature is the following. Nature builds the environment for cortical columns to emerge. And the sensory data, this is what forms it. One possible solution is the following. Nature grows the brain as just a set of layers. The mutual arrangement of certain neurons is what makes the difference. I would bet that columns start to form in neocortex right after birth, when the brain starts to process sensory load. Imagine that you project a certain pattern from thalamus on some small area of neocortex. This area in future will split itself into several columns under the influence of input data. And the way it works, excitatory neurons react to the input patterns and try to activate the output neurons, which resides in that area. But inhibitory neurons at the same time try to inhibit all neurons in adjacent areas. In this case, if some certain column is excited, it inhibits every other adjacent column around. In order for any adjacent column to activate, input neurons should find the pattern which allows that column to win, and therefore to inhibit everyone else, including our initial column. There's a problem when some column can start to react on all possible patterns and suppress every other column around. But it's not happening since neocortex tuned in a way that overloaded neurons exhaust their resources, and therefore their sensitivity to input signals decreases, and in opposite, silent or underloaded neurons increase their sensitivity and even trigger sporadically without any input. Over time, constantly overloaded and maybe constantly underloaded neurons die, and that forms visible column. And if we assume that neurons which spike at the same time enforce their bound, each column will start to react on unique patterns only, and therefore several columns distribute sensory load by competing with each other on the one hand, and by preventing each other from overloading on the other. So one of the functions of neocortex on the one hand is to react on the common patterns, but on the other hand, patterns should be as much further away from the neighbor columns as possible. And the column which won activates the output neuron, which sends the signal to the highest sections of the neocortex. For example, in case of the visual input, the first sensory layer tries to find small lines like vertical, horizontal, or diagonal ones. Second sensory layer tries to find angles or crosses of lines from a previous layer. So basically, recognize more complex shapes, and so on. But how do we connect different parts of the brain with each other? How it's done? If you remember, we still have the connectivity problem. If you have two sections connected to each other directly, what will happen if certain connections degrade? Do we want to let this area around this connection to be just idle? Or what if for some reason some connections got scrambled? Or what if the brain doesn't get visual input at all? We probably want that area to handle sensory input from skin or ears. And we still expect the signal to be topographically arranged, right? But what does it mean to be topographically arranged for the output from the previous sensory layer? And I think the way it's done is that nature treats output from underlying layer as a sensory input of higher order. So what is happening is that output from the neocortex goes back to the thalamus, topographically arranged one more time, and projected to the other parts of the brain. And this pattern repeats over and over and over again. And the last set of questions for today: how the brain, or nature in a more broad sense, knows where on the neocortex to project each part of the sensory input. How the brain knows that visual input should be reversed upside down. How does it adjust itself if we wear inverted glasses? How sensory substitution work, and why does it work? And why does neuroplasticity exist? And the answer is pretty simple. It doesn't know the right way to project. From the brain's perspective, we all just a skin ball. The eyes are a special sort of skin which reacts to the photons. From the brain's perspective, it's just an abstract sensory input. Skin, eyes, ears, and neocortex itself are all connected to thalamus as one huge sensory input. Then thalamus tries to topographically arrange this whole thing and project it to neocortex. If, for example, some sensory area, tip of a finger or an eye, receive a lot of variant meaningful information, it gets larger portion of neocortex, and vice versa. If some area sends a similar signal, the whole area treated as the one axon. This is why if the variety of meaningful signal decreases, the portion of neocortex devoted to that source of signal shrinks. Thalamus tries to sort or arrange initial sensory input and its derivatives, which we can treat as sensory input of higher orders, as if it one huge sensory input. So basically it leverages the data itself and past experience, but that's probably another topic, to extract the meaning out of it. This is why we have integration areas of neocortex, where signals from areas are integrated together, since these signals happen to be similar by time and pattern. So I guess that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next videos. Bye.